start off waiting for people to join. Hi everyone, just in case you might have missed that message about 30 seconds ago, we're just going to leave it another 30 or so seconds before we start, waiting for people to join. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to North Coders Skills Bootcamp in Coding, Introduction to Programming. My name is Amal Batra. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at North Coders. North Coders has been running coding bootcamps for just over 5 years now. And this week we're about to graduate our 900th person from all of the coding bootcamps that we've run over the last 5 years. And today's session, you'll be given an insight into programming, an introduction to programming from Jonny, who might have done this a couple of times before. And he will, give you an idea of how to get into programming, kind of what you can expect from being a programmer, and also a bit of a glimpse into what life could be like on a North Coders bootcamp. We are currently, bootcamp applications are open, they're continually open, but we have an agreement and a contract with the Department for Education. And so if you are a resident of Yorkshire and the Humber, as well as the Northwest of the UK, the Northeast of the UK and across the Midlands, then if you are interested in joining the North Coders Bootcamp, then feel free to apply. And if you make it through the prep steps and then sort of successfully get through our entry challenge, you'll be given a scholarship. And so your place on a North Coders Bootcamp sort of between now and the start of January would be fully funded. So it's a great time to be learning to code. It's a great time. You're in good company. As I said, we're about to graduate our 900th person through the program, and 95% of our alumni do find work at over 270 northern businesses. So without further ado, I am going to leave you in the capable hands of Jonny Rathbone.
Thank you, Amal. Really lovely to be here today, and thank you for giving up your Tuesday evening to a little bit of introduction to programming. I hope you'll forgive me if occasionally I seem to be glancing off to the side. I've got 2 screens here, and on my other screen I've got your comments, and I've got my notes as well. So please don't think that I am going to be doing everything from memory today. We'll talk more about like how programming works, what you're expected to kind of know and remember, and how programmers cheat all the time, basically. And as Amal said, I'm not gonna do like these are the first steps into coding, because there's loads of great resources into that about that maybe we could talk about at the end. We'll have time for questions, and if you want pointing in a good first steps direction, then we can definitely talk about that. Instead, I'm gonna be, I guess, answering the question, what can I do once I've done a little bit of coding? What cool things can I make? What can I, what will kind of reveal the how easy it is to actually make something happen once you've spent a bit of time studying and getting to know what's out there. So maybe the thing we're going to make today, which is a chat room, which is starting to feel a bit old school now. I don't really use chat rooms a huge amount, but still, a relatively complex application. And yet we're going to show that if you can understand all of the little bits of processes that are going on, not remember them, not memorize them, not be able to go away and recreate them, but just vaguely understand what's going on, then you're in a really good position to start doing some cool stuff really soon with programming. So feel free to chat to me in the comments, and I'll keep trying to look up there. But you can also fairly shortly talk to me through the chat room that we're going to make, because hopefully you've all received this link in an email to something called CodePen. CodePen's really cool because I can code along in here, and you can see everything I'm doing. And if you've got two monitors or you're able to flick around, you can code along with me by following the link. And if you lose track with what I'm doing, because I will skip over the odd little bit, then as long as I remember to keep pressing save up here occasionally, then all you'll have to do is reload the page and you'll be able to jump in with where I'm at. So if you need me to press save because it's like, oh, I've lost track of what you were doing and my code's not working, then just give me a shout. I'll press save and you can refresh your page. If you can't follow along right now, then you can access a video with this recording after the event. We'll send out a link to that, and we'll send the links to this CodePen again. And you can just have a go in your own time. Yeah, I think I'm going to get going. If you're on this page, it's possible that your CodePen looks a little bit different. Your windows might be in different places. For this application, I think this is the best arrangement. So if you want to change it to look like mine, you can click this button up here and it gives you different views. So I think this is the normal default view for a CodePen, but I'm going to switch to this one for today. Okay, cool. So a chat room. Well, like any web application, a chat room is going to be comprised of 3 different parts, which we've got nicely signaled for us in these tabs up here. We've got HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And these are the 3 parts of any web application that you have ever visited is likely to be made up of these 3 things. And we're going to do a bit in each of them today. I've got a few things in here already that are going to help guide us, but not very much. Most of it we're going to write over the course of the next half hour, 40 minutes or so. So I've got HTML. Now, HTML or hypertext markup language is basically the content of the web page. So everything that you can see on the screen, all the words and the buttons and links and things like that, they're kind of described in the HTML. The CSS is all about the presentation of it, or how it's laid out. Things like colors and borders and margins, they all get described in the CSS. So CSS is about the presentation. Cascading style sheets, or style is a key word from there. That's what CSS stands for. And then the most fun bit, as far as I'm concerned, is the JS or JavaScript. And that basically gives us all the behavior. So if we want to do anything interesting with our website in terms of how it reacts to things we're doing as a user, then we have to do that in the JavaScript. So I just want to emphasize again, especially for those of you who might have just arrived, this is not about you being able to understand every single line of code and be able to go away and recreate it. This is just about showing you what you can do once you've done a few bits and pieces. And in fact, this is an exercise that we don't actually anymore. We used to do on the course on our North Coders Bootcamp. Towards the start of the front end bit, the stuff to do with front end web applications. We do something else now instead, but I've co-opted it and use it for this session now. All right, I'm just gonna check messages. All right, sounds good. So let's start with the HTML. And as I say, please feel free to ask questions at any point, and I'll do my best to answer them. So in my HTML, and in fact in all of my languages, I've got some grayed out bits of writing, and you might notice that these look a little bit more readable. These are like proper sentences. Now these are called comments, and in my CSS I've got similar ones. They've got different characters around them, and in my JavaScript as well I've got comments, but they're all grayed out, and that basically is things that are there for us as developers. They're not there for the computer to interpret. They'll get ignored. So if we need to kind of remind ourselves what we're doing, then we can just add a comment, and that will make it easy for us. And you can see I've got a couple of things in here which all they are doing is grabbing a nice font from Google that we're going to use inside our application. I've just done that already. And then, as I've noted here, we're going to put everything inside this body tag. So everything we want to see in our HTML or on our web page needs to live inside this body tag. And a tag is got 2 parts. It's got like an opening tag here and a closing tag, which has got the slash. So everything that goes inside here, we could say is in the body or a child of the body. And we're only going to need 3 things, at least for the simple version of our chat room. We need a title, we need somewhere for our messages to appear, like our message list, and we need to be able to like write a message and send it off as well. So I'm going to go ahead and implement those things, and the title is going to be the easiest bit, and we're going to see that right away. So I'm going to have another tag for my title. I'm going to use a heading tag, an H1 tag. I can have up to 6 different layers of headings, but H1 is the top title, the way our main thing goes. So I'm going to stick in North Coders chat for that one, NC chat. And this on the right hand side should be updating as I do things. It will always be about a second behind. Cool. So there we go. There's NC chat, that's my heading. We've already done one off our list, which is great. Now, the next thing we're not going to see at all at the moment, because all we're doing is trying to create a space for our messages to live. But until we give some styles to those messages and until we actually have some messages in there, we aren't going to be able to see anything. So you'll have to trust that this bit is working until a bit later. And I'm going to have a new tag for this space, which is called a div, which I think is a vaguely amusing name. And that's just short for a division on our webpage, so it'll divide a bit of space. And inside that, I'm going to create another tag for a list of messages. So UL stands for unordered list. So we're not going to like number these messages or anything like that, but we're going to have a div and a UL. So these things later on, maybe in our JavaScript or in our CSS, we're going to want to do some stuff with this, and it's going to be hard to know what these things are if we just leave them as a div and a UL. So I'm going to add inside my div tag an ID to each of these, and that's going to make it really easy to find these tags in my other languages when I want to do something with them. So I'm going to call this message list container and try and give things really clear names so I know what I'm talking about when I come back to my programming at any other time. So I've got a container, that's going to be like the box around my messages, and this is going to be the thing that holds the messages themselves. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and save. Now, that will do for somewhere for our messages to appear, and then somewhere to write a message. Okay, well, we're going to use a different tag again for this. We're going to use a very useful tag in web development, which is a form. And pretty much every website you've ever been to, ordered your shopping off, submitted your details on, has probably got a form. And the form is going to be responsible for submitting our message that we're going to write. So I need a couple of things inside this form. I'm going to have an input where someone's going to write their message, and we should see that in a second because that has like a default styling on a web browser. So a little open space there. And I'm going to create a label around this input so we know what this input is for. So you can see that I'm sticking the label on either side of the input. And I'm going to write some text here, which I'm going to very unimaginatively write as, what would you like to say? Cool. I hope you all agree that this is a beautiful website so far. We're going to work on making it a little bit less 1990s shortly. Now, these are also things that I'm going to want to target in my JavaScript a bit later. I'm going to be able to say, well, okay, I need to do something when someone submits this message. And I'm going to want to do something. I'm going to need to be able to see what someone has written inside there. So I'm going to give IDs to these things as well. An ID to the form, which is called message input form. That's what I've chosen to call it. And an ID for the input, which is cool. I'm going to just call message input. And you'll notice that my input tag looks a little bit different to the rest. It's called a self-closing tag. It doesn't have 2 parts. It just closes itself. So we have the slash at the end here. And that's because we shouldn't have anything inside an input. The user's going to decide what goes in the input when they type stuff here, right? We're not going to put anything in there ourselves. Cool. And I just noticed Anna and Ray have both asked that question, so I'm glad I anticipated that. Hopefully that's answered you. So that's a special thing about our input tags. Some tags, they don't need a closing tag, they close themselves. Cool. And then this could kind of work if we do this and we press enter, that should submit the form. But it's usually quite nice to have a button as well, so people know. If people prefer to click the button to know that they've done the right thing, then they can do that. And I'm just going to give this button its own div, so it goes into like a new line on my screen. And then another tag, which is specially for buttons. And again, we'll get some nice default styling for the button as well. Cool. Okay. Well, we've almost got a chat room. I guess we can't see anything, but we've got basically the template of it. And now I'm going to pop into CSS and try and make this a little bit more nicely organized. I'll go ahead and save though first. Okay, maybe we'll come back to our HTML later, but for now, let's add some styles. So I've got a few things that I might style. I might skip a couple of these for now, and then we'll come back to them if we've got time, see how we go. But I'm going to add definitely a few things to make this a bit nicer. So first thing I'm going to target is the whole web page itself, and I'm going to do that by the body. And everything that I'm going to write here is going to correspond with something I've done with my HTML. So when I put in just a word here, what I'm doing is I'm looking for a tag in my HTML with the same name. And anything that I put now inside these curly brackets here is going to be something that applies to everything inside my body. So I'm not going to do very much, but I am going to add a slightly different background. You'll normally find that websites very rarely have the pure white that comes by default, because it's a bit hard on the eyes. So I'm just making it slightly grayer. You might not even be able to see that at home, but I think it's a very slight improvement. And then I'm also going to just give a bit of space around the whole thing, because I think when your websites go right to the edge of the screen, sometimes it doesn't work so well on a mobile. Sometimes it's a bit hard to scan the whole thing. So by adding a margin, then we can stick a bit of space in between the edge of the screen and inside it. Not much to it, but all these little things can make a difference. Cool. Well, you may remember I grabbed a font earlier in my HTML, and that font is called Pangolin. So now I'm going to apply it to all of the text in my screen. So I'm going to do it to everything that's in the body. But actually, I'll do that first. So I'm going to add a CSS attribute here. That's what I'm doing when I'm inside these brackets, called an attribute. And this one's called font family. And really don't need to worry about remembering the names of these. I'm working off in fact, now's a good time to just reveal how much I am cheating. I've literally done this. I'm just literally copying from here, so that please don't think I'm remembering anything. It's not what this is all about. So I've got I know it's called Pangolin, and it's kind of good behavior in when you're web developing, to be like, oh, well, perhaps they didn't manage to fetch this font, so I'm going to give it one to fall back on. And there's a few inbuilt fonts on every browser, so I'm going to go with a cursive font if we don't find the Pangolin one. But you can see it has applied this really jazzy looking font to a couple of things. It's applied it to my heading and to my label, but it hasn't actually to my button or to the text that gets written in here. So don't know why that's how it works on CSS, but that is how it works. So I'm going to say, okay, I want all my buttons to have this font as well, and I want all my inputs to use this font as well. Cool. Couple of cool questions. So, and I did want to say to Anna's question, she said silly question, is that I don't want to guarantee it, but I'd be very surprised if anyone asks a silly question today. I can't think of a silly question. I know this is going to be new to all sorts of people, completely new. So please don't be shy. Tom has asked, there's so much CSS styling out there. How do you know what you should be using? I'm a bit worried, Tom. I'm not going to give you a very nice answer here, but I'm not a design expert. I'm not even very good at styling websites. It's a whole discipline in and of itself. So the way I've learned is basically every time I've made something, I've decided I'm going to try to do that. I don't know how to do that, so I'm going to work out how to do it, and I'm going to look up how to do it. I'm going to go to all sorts of places that might tell me until I figure it out, and it becomes one more weapon in your arsenal, one more bow, one more string to your quiver, or whatever the phrase is, right? And eventually you start picking up more and more. It's not going to happen quickly, but there are a few things that you can do to get a lot of bang for your buck. So just learning how to apply a background, how to do a new font, how to do a margin, how to add colors and stuff like that. You can get like 80% of the way there to a half decent looking website without too much stress. RAY Studios, can the font family be added to the first body tag, which has the background and the margin? It could have been, yeah, absolutely could have been. So I'm kind of targeting the body twice here, but then I've decided to separate it out this way, so it's a bit more obvious. So I'm not putting font family. I'd rather put body in two places than font family in two places, because if I want to change my font, I only have to go to one place to do it. I think that's more likely. But really, not that much thought went into it when I decided to do it this way. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go with my chat room box now. It's time to actually make this look like something. So I earlier, very nicely to myself, made it easy to target this message list container div. As you can see, I've got a couple of divs. I want to make sure I target this one. So I added this ID here. And so the syntax, or the way I write that, the way I target that, is instead of just writing a word, I'm going to put a little hash at the beginning and then write the name of the ID that I gave. So that's just saying, find me everything with an ID of message list container. And in fact, with an ID, there should only ever be one thing that has that ID, else it's not an ID. So I'm going to give this a size, which is 500 px. And if you're wondering what px is, I'll let you know shortly. You could always write it in the chat if you want to show off. I'm going to give it a border, and at this point we should probably start seeing it. And border is going to take a few bits of information. So how thick the border is, like the pattern of the border. I'm just going for like a solid line. And I'm also going to give the color of it, and I'm going to use the North Coders red, which is, I have a feeling, not this, because I always get it wrong. And normally someone corrects me, but it's something very close to this. And so now I've got a big red box, not a very good size for writing loads of messages in. So I'm going to give it a height as well. Let's go for 4 pixels. Oh, and I just gave it away, but I see Jameson's in there with PX pixels. Well done, Jameson. You get 5 points. And I'm going to add one more thing. We might not see this today, but if I get lots of messages in here, then I don't want them to like spill out of this box. I want to be able to scroll up and down within this window to see the messages. So that's going to give me that behavior. I won't see that unless you ask lots of great questions at the end, though, which I would encourage. Okay, cool. Then the message list itself. I'm going to add just a couple of things in here. So one thing is that I don't like the bullet points that I'm going to get by default. Don't need bullet points in this kind of message, in this kind of list. So that's going to get rid of those. And I also am going to set padding to be none, because you get some weird default padding in lists. So don't worry too much about that. That is just anticipating some stuff going on. Cool. Okay, I'm going to leave these things for later. We'll see how they go. see what we've got time for. But I am going to style this form because I think this is a bit cramped at the bottom here, and I think we could do a bit better. So I'm going to target the form field, and that is going to have a little margin top. So I'm going to add some space in between this and the thing itself. Not very much, but a little bit, so it's not too cramped in there. I'm going to also make the input field a little bit more easy to write stuff in. So this is a chat room. We need a bit of space to write stuff in. So I'm going to make the input field a bit wider, 300 pixels, let's say. And I'm going to give it some padding, 10 pixels. And that's going to mean that when I write in there, I've got some space between the text that I'm writing and the border around the edge. So that's the difference between padding and margin. Padding is between your content and your border, and your margin is between your border and everything else that's around it. Anna said, should 0 be 0 pixels? Certainly can be. Both work, but I'll do that to be explicit. Fine, no problem at all. And I'm going to style my button a little bit because it's you get some default styles from a button, but I think we can move them a little bit. So I'm going to use the same North Coders red for this, and I'd be impressed if anyone can tell me what this means. This phrase, like how that might mean red. If anyone wants to have a guess at that in the chat, that would be cool. And if not, I'll talk about it in a bit. I'm going to change the border around it, which is making it a solid black, which I prefer to the weird one they give. I'm going to give it a bit of padding, so we've got some space around the text, like our input field, and that black writing is hard to see now with that red background, so I'm going to make the whiting the same white smoke as the background, and I think this is nice. Cool. Okay, Cameron, Anna, and K Buddha all giving me hex keys. Yeah, and I think I'll give an extra point to Cameron for saying RGB, so the red, green, and blue values. So we've got a certain amount of red, that's the EB, a certain amount of green, which is the 1.5, and a certain amount of B, which is 2F, and the hex in that respect means that we don't go up to 100 with our two numbers. So if this were just a decimal normal numbers, we could go from 0 to 99, right, with two spaces. But with hex, we can go up to F. So we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F. And so between two numbers, we get 16 times 16 options, or 256 options. So you might have seen color schemes where you have up to from 0 to 255 as well. And this is just another way of writing that. This is a common way of doing that. And you can, if you do a bit of hex maths in your head, you might be able to work out that EB is going to be much bigger value than 1.5 and 2F. So hence what we're seeing is mainly red, but there is a bit of green and blue in there as well. Okay, right. I'm going to stick with that for now. And I think it's time to move on to the JavaScript. Let's save. Cool. So first, I'm just going to address this scary looking bit of code here. So the cool thing about this chat room that we're making today is that if you're on the same code pen as me, we're all going to be writing in the same chat room. We can all connect to the same database, which is just a fancy name for the computer that's storing our messages on. That's not my computer or your computer. It's another computer, a server that lives somewhere. I don't know where it is. It belongs to Google, because Google make the database that I am using, Firebase. So it's probably somewhere in Western Europe, but I'm not entirely sure where. And the cool thing about Firebase is that it does like real-time database. It's a real-time database. So if you add something to the database, then I can very easily make my front end, my client, my computer update with what you've said without having to go and fetch it. It's like the server is telling me that there's a new message and sends it to me, rather than me having to go to the server and say, are there any new messages for me? Which is how all the old school chat rooms, IRC chat rooms and stuff from the 90s used to work. So what I've got here is just some config to connect to the right database. And then here we should probably understand a little bit that this is basically looking at all the messages on the database. And every time a new message appears, then I'm going to get that message, information about that message here. And I'm not doing anything with what it means right now. I'm not going to do anything with this. I've not done anything with this message right now. At the moment, it just sort of creates something in the memory of my computer and then it disappears. But in a minute, I'm going to have a function where that's going to stick that message on my list and we're going to see it in here. But we've not written that function yet, so we'll work our way towards that. A few things to do first. We are going to grab some of these elements from my HTML so we can get information from the right place, put things in the right place. And if I do that all up top, then it'll be much easier to see what elements or what tags it is that I've fetched. So first off, I'm going to get the message list. I call that message list, and I'm starting all of these with the word const, or the keyword const, which just means constant. And all that's telling the program is that this thing should never change. Like I'm never going to change this message list for something else. It's going to constantly be what I assign it to right now. So this message list is always going to be whatever I get when I go to my document, go to my web page, and I get the element by the ID that I gave it earlier, and I'm going to pass it in the ID that I know it has. That's message list. Oh, so that message list, that corresponds with the tag here. So my message list now is this UL tag, this unordered list tag. And if I want to stick any messages in there, then I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm going to stick them in. UL is going to be the parent. And yeah, well, we'll see that in a minute. Okay, cool. So I also want my form to do something very similar. I need to try and not make any spelling errors. And if you see me make any mistakes, don't be shy. Don't assume I got it right. It's very possible that I screwed it up. So the best thing about well, when I learnt to code at North Coders, was doing it alongside other people and pair programming or working on stuff together, because you just catch so many of the mistakes that you don't manage to do when you're by yourself. So if any of you are a little bit on your way of your coding journey, I'm sure you've had frustrations where you just feel like you've got everything, and when you and it turns out the thing that was making it not work was just one missing letter or one missing character or one wrong character, and you kick yourself for a bit afterwards, which you shouldn't, because everyone does that. We are silly, fallible human beings, and that's why we get computers to do all of this stuff for us. But sometimes just another pair of human eyes is really useful as well. So I'm going to also be really interested in what someone has typed in the message input. So I'm going to need a way to reference that as well. Okay, cool. So this next bit of code might look a little bit confusing, but as long as you understand why we've written it, that's all that really matters for now. So I want my form to react when I click this button, or indeed when I press enter on this form here. And at the moment, the form is going to do something a bit weird if I press enter. So if I just type a message, press enter on this form, for some reason I get this not found message up here. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm not really looking for anything right yet, so I don't know why it's telling me I've not found it. But this is an old behavior of how forms have worked since almost the beginning of the World Wide Web. And it's not how we normally want forms to work, or often not how we want forms to work now. So at the moment, it's sort of trying to send me to somewhere else in order to respond to what's happened with that form. So I'm going to get rid of that behavior. And I can see a few people have already had that experience with getting one character wrong. So well done for spotting it so soon. Okay, so my message input form, not column, my message input form, I'm going to listen for an event. And that event is going to be called submit. And submit is going to cover me for both clicking the button and for pressing enter when someone's on the form. And when someone submits, I want to do something. And when you want to do something in JavaScript, you often want to write a function to do it. So this bit of code that I've highlighted here, this is all one bit of behavior that I stick inside this function bracket. And that means I can reuse it. So every time the form submits, it will carry out this piece of code. So what do I want it to do? Well, I want to get the message text, what someone wrote inside there. And I can do that by asking the message input what its value is. And that's going to be the text that was written inside that. And then I am going to send it to my database. So my database comes with some nice, useful methods. I want to stick it inside my messages collection with all the rest of everyone's messages. And I can ask it to add, and I'm going to actually add a couple of things. So you might think, okay, well, I just need to send the text of the message. But you might remember from up here that I am actually sorting my messages or ordering my messages by a timestamp, which is ascending. And that's going to make sure my database knows which messages came first, because I don't want all my chat room messages to be all in a random order. I want to keep them in the order that they arrived. So I'm going to keep two bits of information together inside this object, which is this curly braces. And these are useful for putting two or more bits of information together inside just sort of one thing. And I can say, okay, I want something inside my message object to be called text, and that's going to be the message text that I've just found. I want something inside there to be called a timestamp, as we've just seen. And I'm going to do that with find what the exact time is at the moment someone submitted it with this bit of code here, which we don't fully need to understand, but you can have loads of points. I'm going to say 14 points if anyone can tell me what that will actually turn into in my database. And if you don't know, you won't get it because it's a bit weird. Cool. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it there now. So getting the text and sending it to the database, that's what I want to do when I submit my form, right? That will do. Okay, so it's listening for that. Now, oh, cool. And then I've actually covered this bit as well. So this is making our form listen, and then everything inside this function is what we do when we press the button to enter our text. So there we go. And that just gives us one more thing to do, which is stick the messages inside this box, whether they're my messages or someone else's messages. We need to get them to appear inside that box. So this is the last bit of code we need to write in order to do this. I'm going to write my own function here. I'm going to give this one a name because I need to use it up here when I get a new message. So I'm going to make sure this function's got a name. I'm going to call it add message to list. And this function I'm going to use lots of times, but I want to be able to use it on lots of different messages, whatever message someone sends. So this is called a parameter. And every time this function is called or used, then I'm going to get a different message in here. And that's going to make sure I get the right information in my message. So I've got quite a complicated version up here on my screen, but I'm going to write a simpler one to begin with. So please forgive me if I get a little bit tripped, trip out a little bit. Forgive me, I'm just going to close my Teams because I've got someone from one of the groups that I'm teaching at the moment asking me a question, but I'll come back to them later. So I've got a message list item. I need to make a new tag for this. So we don't need to do all of our tags at the beginning. We can make them in JavaScript, make our elements and stick them in. If we use this function called document.createElement, and I want a list item function, something to go inside my UL. Some people are going for my 14 points here. I'll come to your answers in a sec. I am going to I'm going to create something to go inside my list element called a, what should I call this? I'm going to call this message text, and I'm going to new element for this. Another one, you're getting loads of new elements today. This one's called a span. And a span is like a little bit of space for something to live, a little bit of horizontal space. It's a bit different from a div in that a div will make the next thing appear on the next line and so on, but a span will allow things to go next to each other. So that might be useful if we want to put in the time or a user or something else also in the line. And then I'm going to stick some text inside this message text. So let's do message text dot inner text. That's how we do that. And I'm going to grab the message that was sent to me from the database and access the text that lives there. So that text there, that's basically the same thing as this text here. So when I added my message, I got the text that was inside my input field, sent it to another computer somewhere on a database. And then if you're all following along with this, when this function calls, this is where it's going to come back out the other side of the wash. Cool. And then I need to stick all of these things together. So I'm going to go for message, list item, and child. That's going to stick my span inside my list item. And then one final thing, I think, is going to be that I stick this list item inside my message list. So I honestly don't forgive you even remotely if you've got lost in the last few seconds there. So I'll just go over it again very briefly. But as I say, I've said lots of times, it's not about you being able to recall how to do everything here. It's about being able to understand the vague reasoning as to why we've done it. So all I'm doing here is creating one element to go inside my list. That's going to be like a line inside my list. And then creating another element inside that to hold the text of my message. And then with my append childs, I'm just sticking the text inside the list item and then the list item inside the list. And until I connect it to something that's already there on the page, we won't see anything. Right. I've got one more line of code to write before hopefully this is operational, but I'll just come back to Robert and Ray. So Robert, you're not quite right, I'm afraid. It's a very sensible guess. Now, it is all of the information, the thing that we're getting back there does have all of that information in there. And we certainly can get it in that kind of format, but not quite in the way that I've written it with this get time at the end here. So you're really not far off. I'm going to give you 12 points, but I am going to give Ray the 4 points, even if Ray wants to pass on some of those points to Google, because that is a very specific and accurate answer. So number of, I actually think it's seconds rather than milliseconds in this case, but I may be wrong. So the number of seconds between the January 1st, 1970, because I guess they figured, why would anyone need a date from before then on the web? So there's if you need to get older dates, you have to find other ways of doing it than this. Okay, well done to you two. I'm going to go and connect this up now. So I've written this function. At the moment, this is just some code that is never used. No one does anything with it. But I need to add that to the stuff I had up here. And say, okay, when the database does realize there's been a change, I will go ahead and use this function. So called add message to list. And I'm going to pass in my message. Okay, cool. Right, I'm going to save now. And I'm going to try it. And this is where I discover I've done something horribly wrong. You can see all of the message from previous things here, previous sessions. So I hope you can all see this. Yay. Oh, okay. So nearly it appeared, but then you notice this not found thing disappeared. And that's because I forgot to do something I mentioned earlier, which is get rid of that basic behavior. So no big deal. When I submit here, I'm going to, I get access to my submission event, and I need to add one more bit of code here, event.prevent default, and that is going to stop that behavior. And cool, I can see some other people have got in here already. Maybe people already knew how to do event.prevent default, which is very impressive. Oh no, I guess you don't. Yeah, sorry, it would have worked without you knowing that. But that's cool. I'm going to save, so if people need to catch up, that's great. So that is it, really. We've now got a functioning chat room. It may not have all the features you might hope from a chat room. We've not got anyone's name. We've not got times or anything like that. We're not signing in, but we can all now talk on here. So I am now happy to spend the last 15 minutes or so doing anything, which could be adding some more stuff to this, or could be answering questions that you might have, whether that's about tech, whether that's about what we do at North Coders, about what you might do next, anything at all. So those questions, they can come up in the comments. If you post them in the comment section, then we can make them appear nicely on the screen. Matt's in charge of that. If you do it on here, that's cool as well. Though. I'm totally fine. I've realized something, and I was wondering, like, how could that person have typed "I can" really, really quickly and loads of times and submit it all that time? And that is because we haven't cleared the input field, which is something you would probably do on a real life form, right? So I'm going to add one more bit of code here to my submission event, and I'm going to be like, okay, well, my message input value, I'm going to turn that back into an empty string, or like get rid of the text that was inside there. So now if I do, this should disappear message, then it appears down here, but it does disappear from here. So there you go. One more tiny bit of work. Okay, right. I've given you loads of time to think of some questions, and I've got one from Jane, and I've got a fairly technical one from Robert, who's clearly worked with some older databases, which I will answer briefly. One from Jameson as well. So please keep them coming in. I'll get through as many as I can in the time. So Robert asked, do deadlock transactions need to be handled for the Google database? It manages all its own transactions. It won't allow synchronous writes to the database. You've got no risk of people doing race conditions on the database. So I don't know. It sounds to me like you might understand that answer. I'm sure lots of people won't. But if you want to ask me anything more about it, feel free to give me a shout after the session. Jane is asking, what opportunities will coding open up to me? What's life like as a software developer? So this is the most important question. I'll do the second bit first. So I used to be a teacher. I taught for 5 years or so. Before that, I worked in schools for another 5-6 years. I don't know if any of you are from teaching. There is lots about teaching that I loved. I love education as a thing. That's why I'm still kind of doing this sort of thing. But I found it stressful in lots of other ways. I found it really hard that lots of decisions were made for me by the structures and how things worked, and I found the whole thing very bureaucratic and hard to handle. I love the freedom that you get as a trusted software developer. That you, in general, you're sort of trusted to find a solution and find the way that things work for you. I've got 2 kids, and it's much more flexible. I've had a lovely time spending time with them over the pandemic. I can't claim that I've had some not really lovely experiences during the pandemic, some bad things as well, obviously, but having the freedom to kind of work from home and work really flexibly is excellent. I find the whole community extremely supportive. Everyone is kind of working towards the same thing. You generally find that software folks are lovely people who just want to help you, and really kind of welcoming environment. So I honestly can't recommend it enough. It's obviously pretty well paid as well, which matters to a lot of people, including myself, definitely. And so you really do feel like you're well compensated for the work you do as well in general. So and coding, the software development, we at North Coders, we do web development. There's also loads of other things we do. You might use coding for, so whether that's robotics or working with data, working with Internet of Things, so connecting up your cars to the internet and your fridges and whatever. Almost everything has some kind of microchip in it nowadays. So it's not just web, even though that's what I do at the moment. I'm working with a group of people who work for a company that make warehouse management software, right? Which doesn't sound very exciting at that level, but actually the technical problems that you solve down there to make a running warehouse, I've found really fascinating. So yeah, I hope that gives you enough to go on. I've got quite a few more questions, so I'm going to try and rush through. Jameson says, in this IDE we have 3 windows for HTML, CSS, and JS. So are they all saved in one file? So I'm not entirely sure how CodePen manages it, but in a classical web application, it would actually be 3 separate files. So you'd generally send your HTML, your CSS, and then you might have lots of JavaScript files, and you might have lots of CSS files as well, actually. And your web browser would be responsible for making sure it got the right ones for the things that are on screen at that time. But when you write these things, you'll be writing them in separate files. And that is something that people actually find quite difficult at the start of learning how to code, is tracking lots of different files with all of your stuff in. But it's something you get used to. Okay, but with the coding bootcamp course, does one end up with HTML, JS, CSS? Yeah. So this is the main stuff that we focus on. We've only really cared about what's happening on the browser, on our front end right now. That's about a quarter of the course. Another quarter of the course is what's happening in the background, or the back end, we call it. So the server that might be managing, sending all of these messages to each other. We spend a quarter of the course doing that. But we also use JavaScript for that as well. JavaScript's a really versatile language, can use it in both places. And we also talk about some database languages like SQL that you might have heard of before. We spend the first quarter of the course just working on JavaScript, away from front end, away from back end, just as a language, getting to know what it can do and how to work with it discreetly. And then the last quarter is like a project where you might work with all sorts of different things. We really encourage people to try out a new language, try out a new technology, try out something that might not even be on the web. We've had all sorts of really exciting projects. I recommend you go to our YouTube page if you want to see some of the wide variety of things that people come up with. And we're trying to make sure every group does something new. So you may leave with some different experience. And in fact, people, about half, this number goes up and down, and I don't know what it is exactly at the moment, but about half of the people who go to North Coders go on to get a job in a different language to JavaScript. So C#, C++, Python, Ruby, Java. You may have heard of some of these. They're all languages that we focus way more on, like what goes into coding rather than how to code, rather than how to code JavaScript, if that makes sense. Cameron's got a really pertinent question here. They list specific essential skills when you look for a software developer. How do you balance learn everything without learn enough to look up what? Yeah. Okay. So kind of getting on two things here. So I think the first thing to remember is that when job listings get posted, they're quite often posted by recruiters, whether it's internal or external, who may not completely understand exactly what they're writing about. Like, they'll know about the technologies the company uses, and the technologies they're writing will be important. But actually, when you come to interview, it probably becomes more about what you wrote there last, Cameron, about like how do you tackle a problem, whether that's going back, thinking about previous problems you've solved that are similar but different, and thinking what lessons you can learn from them, whether it's going to within an existing code base and trying to find a solution that matches from there, or whether it is indeed just by Googling or whatever your favorite search engine is. And I think that really it leans far more towards that. Really, what most people want to see in an interview is that you know how to begin solving a problem, rather than a big array of facts. So they might not care that you remember that a span is the right tag for this situation, but they will care that you knew to think about what I needed a tag, I needed an element that had these properties, that did this kind of thing, and I know how I might search for that, or I know where I might find one to remind me what it is and what I can do with it. Fairly kind of loose summary there of what you should be going for. Beyond that, it's going to be a bit of trial and error, I'm afraid. I'm going to come back to your second question in a minute, Kbilla, just to make sure I ask a couple of other people's, but I will come back to it if we've got time. So Anna says, what's the best way to get more information about the courses, how to get funding? The website, our website is the best place, definitely. I'll leave you to explore this at your own discretion, but more information about the bootcamp, the coding bootcamp, we do it remotely or we do it on site. You can mix and match. You can come on site or not, however you want to do it. And if you were here at the beginning, Amal mentioned the excellent scholarship for bootcamps for those of you who are in one of the northern regions of the UK. So there's more details about how that works there as well. Rebecca, brand new to coding. I am interested in keeping up with times, learning a new skill. I can't praise you enough for that, Rebecca. That's exactly what you should be doing. So where do you start? Well, we recommend everyone at North Coders starts with something called Free Code Camp. Free Code Camp is an amazing resource, not least because it's free. It's in the title, so I don't think they're ever going to be able to move away from that business model. But a Free Code Camp has loads of useful information. And you know what? You could learn to code with Free Code Camp, but it is really hard to do it by yourself. It's really hard to do it without instruction. And we do find that most people don't make it through doing everything that's on offer. So if I click on the curriculum here, definitely worth reading this. And then you can see some different sort of courses that they offer, and they're not insignificant courses. There's a lot of time you can spend on these. And this one, we asked people to do a few bits from this JavaScript algorithms and data structures certification. And this is, if you're not into coding, this is pretty dry, right? This is not the exciting, flashy web page stuff or data structures or visualization stuff. So what the best indication you're going to get from doing this is, like, if you're enjoying this, then this is meant, this is good for you. You want to kind of start pursuing it. And if you're not really enjoying this, then maybe it won't be for you. Now, enjoying is different from feeling frustrated with. Like, so if you're feeling frustrated with it because you're struggling to make progress with it, but you feel like you want to make progress with it, then it might be more about you kind of learning to embrace that frustration and finding different ways of tackling and learning the problem. So I certainly don't think it should be about kind of you should be giving up if it's like you're not getting everything out of it that you hoped at this stage. Now it's just coming up to 7. I'm happy to talk through the rest of the questions that are asked here. I also imagine people will need to go and head off. and I will have to rush through questions a little bit because I have got a couple of bedtimes to do, but I don't want to leave anyone hanging. So I'm going to go up to Kishori's question at the end there, and then I'll leave it at that. But you can feel free to head off now, to stick around. And if you need to ask a question, if you'd like to ask a question, then you can either contact me on LinkedIn. I'm Jonny Rathbone, or just contact North Coders, or I'm sure you can find a way of getting a message to us. Cool. So I'll just tackle the rest of these. So Behel says, why did you choose to create li and span on JSON and not on my HTML file? So I could have on my HTML file, but I wouldn't have known how many I needed, because I don't know how many times this person's going to write pie sandwiches forever in my message. So I could have made one for everyone that I thought might appear there and then target the right one. But in this case, it sort of made more sense for me to create them as they were needed. So I did that instead. Hope that answers that question. Ray Studios. I've applied for the bootcamp and going through the prep materials. I seem to forget things like syntax and JS methods, so get stuck on the katas often. How do you remember everything? So half of it is not trying to remember everything. Half of it is being able to articulate the problem that you're having and then look it up. So it's like, okay, what am I actually trying to do here? How could I turn this into human speak in such a way that I could then search for it? But I won't lie, as you practice, there'll be more and more things that you just kind of reach for, and you don't need to look up. You just kind of know how to do, because you've used them 100 times before, and they just become part of your muscle memory. And that isn't gonna just happen. You just have to write lots of code in order for that to happen, and you will start to feel that get the feedback from that quickly, right? It will happen. But I think probably that I don't learn anymore now. I don't think I've learned much new about coding. I've just got better and better at recognizing what problems are and thinking of ways to solve them. But then I still have to go and look up the actual syntax in order to do that. Jane, I'll come back to your second question in a second. Space Dust. Hey, Jonny, could you direct us to a website where we can find common functions and what they mean, common command? Yeah, I do think Free Code Camp's the best place to go for that, because it will go through everything from right from the basics. There won't be one thing on the screen that that it won't explain. So you obviously, I skipped over a lot of things here. There's all sorts of bits of punctuation. It's like, well, is that really important, that comma? Yes, it is, but I haven't really explained why. So if you're trying to tackle this from the ground up and understand every little thing, then that's going to be really difficult. Maybe you could come back to this in a few weeks when you've spent a bit of time on Free Code Camp and use this as a test case. Okay, can I understand a bit better? No, why did I put that bracket there? Why did I add that apostrophe there? But I wouldn't look at this and think, okay, I'm going to now learn why those curly brackets there. I would start with something more fundamental and work your way up that way. Cool. Right, I'm going to go back over some of the other questions. So Kishori said, how does one progress on to other things? So I won't go into much detail about that, but the prep steps that we send you, if you're interested in applying, they'll kind of take you through Free Code Camp and the next couple of steps. And there's no obligation, you can just get these prep steps from us, and really they're just there for us and you to discover whether you want to pursue this and get interested. But they'll take you through the first couple of stages. Then North Coders will take you through a few more stages after that, and then it's going to be the responsibility of your employer. Kishore, you've also said how much time do you have to complete the challenges? So message the number in the SMS. So I'm sure we'll get back to you soon, but feel free to chase it up. I'll send a message to Madison on our onboarding team and see if he's had a message from you. Assuming that you've gone by the same name, I'll get him to chase that up. The prep steps you can take as long as you want to do. There's no rush. We do have like an entry challenge then between you doing the prep steps and starting the course, which is like an hour long, no, 45 minutes, sorry, a 45-minute timed test. And it's basically to make sure that you have kind of jumped into the depth that you need in order to have a good time on the course, because we don't start from day one on the course, right? We expect people to do a little bit of self-learning beforehand, and that way we can get the most out of the course time. So we just need to make sure people are kind of up to scratch on that. That's the point of the entry challenge. It's really not something to worry about. If you've done the prep steps, you'll be very prepped for it, and you can do it. If it doesn't work very well for you the first time, you can do it again at a later date after you've got a sense of what is needed from it. So it's not something you should stress about too much, though of course that's easy for me to say right now. And then I think there was one more question. Jane asked again, like, top skills for coding. Attention to detail is important, but a lot of that gets covered from good working practices like pairing and having good tests, which is something we talk a lot about on the course. Maths is pretty low down. I'm not going to say that I've not used any maths knowledge at all, but I've not needed my GCSE trigonometry or anything like that. I'd say logic is more important than maths. So having a good sense of like why things are in the right order and how you make your code to go to some places and other places. So, but I guess that comes under the banner of maths. But kind of computers are there to do the maths for you, rather than you have to worry about it, I guess. If you work in data and things like that, or cryptography, then you need quite a lot more in the way of maths knowledge. But on the web, it doesn't come up all that much. But problem solving, is the number one thing, and it's usually what employers are looking for. They might test you problem solving by giving you a coding challenge, but they might just test your problem solving by giving you some kind of riddle or some problem to solve out that's got nothing to do with computing, because they care about your kind of how you approach a problem way more than they care about your technical skills. And then a kind of maybe not a skill, but an attitude, a willingness to kind of learn new things and try out new ways of doing things. And also referring back to what I said earlier, an ability to kind of embrace frustration, enjoy it when it's not working, because I'd say like 90% of the time your code isn't working. You're almost always fixing something. It doesn't take very long to write a functioning piece of code. It takes a lot longer to fix a non-functioning piece of code. So you have to kind of enjoy that process. Cool. And then I think there's one question at the end, which I will do for Dark Knight 12012. So when will NC provide a part-time offering? So we are constantly looking at this. We basically can't do at the moment. We're not in a position to do both things and make them quality products. It's that simple. So we have other ways that hopefully can make it possible for you to do this. So even if you don't get the funded places, there are ways that you can defer payment, I believe. I'm not an expert in that, so feel free to look at our website. Now I know that won't solve everyone's problem, because you may not be able to lose your income over the period where you're doing the course. There are a couple of that we also run apprenticeships, and sometimes we have companies that are that basically hire to train at North Coders, and we usually post opportunities like that on our LinkedIn and on Twitter. And on our website, of course. So feel free to keep an eye on those, because that is one route in that might help people in that position. And when we can do a part-time course and know that we can do a good job of it, we will. But at the moment, it's not practical. I'm sorry if that is disappointing. Okay, I think I'll wrap up there. Dan made a good point about how Free Code Camp uses slightly older syntax for things. So yeah, we are actually working on our own solution to tackle this, but I won't give too much away about that at the moment. It's not going to be anytime immediately. So it is worth bearing in mind. But Free Code Camp also has an ES6 section as well, which clarifies a bit of that. Okay, right. Thank you so much, everyone, especially if you stuck around for the last 10 minutes, and to Matt, who's been organizing all of these messages. Sorry to keep you working for another 10 minutes, Matt, but hopefully it was useful for everyone. Yeah, look forward to potentially seeing some of you on the course, or hearing more about what you've been up to. I'll leave this database up for a little while if you want to do it, but not forever. Not usually a good idea to keep an open database up for people, but I'll close it down in a few days. But you can always come back to this code pen and make it work in the next few days. Excuse me. All right. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.